context that the Apostle Paul was in, where he's dealing with marriage with the church in Corinth. It's a very long chapter, so we didn't have time really to go through the whole chapter. So we'll kind of recap a little bit of what was said a couple weeks ago, hopefully without giving the whole sermon again. But basically in chapter 7, of course, it comes out of the context of the latter part of chapter 6. And in that section, the Apostle Paul was dealing with a statement either by the church at Corinth, maybe a summation of things that they assumed about what Paul was teaching, but they were saying, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are profitable. So it's believed that perhaps that first statement, all things are lawful for me, are qualified by Paul by saying not all things are profitable. So that becomes one bookend, but then when you go down to chapter 7 and verse 23, he makes the same statement again. He says all things, are lawful, but not all things are profitable. So we're the two bookends of a section that the Apostle Paul is in which he's helping the church at Corinth navigate things that maybe in some cases are lawful and are okay, but at the same time need to be brought in into a larger framework, context in which they can try to draw out what is most profitable, what is expedient, what is good in that particular case for that particular instance. And so, of course, marriage fits kind of right in the middle, whereas marriage, of course, is something that's very lawful. It's one of the first God instituted on the first day, on the sixth day of creation, when he created man and woman. Marriage was one of the first things that came out of that. And so it's definitely lawful, and it's even, given to us by God. But the Apostle Paul is kind of qualifying that and saying, okay, marriage is good, but there's also some things you got to consider as well. And this was all started and prompted by yet a statement that is believed to have been made by the church at Corinth, but again, could have been Paul. But it says in verse 1, now concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. All right, so said this several times before. The difficulty of 1 Corinthians is a lot of it's like listening to a conversation that's going on. Someone's on the phone, and you only hear what one person is saying. So you got to kind of surmise what the other person is saying based on what you hear that person saying. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. That's the difficulty of 1 Corinthians sometimes, because we know that the church at Corinth had written to him, but we don't have those letters. We don't know specifically what they were asking, which statements are coming from Paul, and these verses coming from the church. But someone was saying it's good for a man not to touch a woman. So this could have been believers at Corinth who was fighting against what we saw in the latter part of chapter 6, where